Chapter 9. The Perfect Alibi. The barbecue incident had been too close a call. Too many eyes, too much unexpected intimacy. What we needed, Tyler and I, was space. Real space. Far from curious neighbors and well-meaning wives. The thought of a camping trip had sparked in my mind like kindling, catching flame. A dangerous, exhilarating idea. The first hurdle, the alibi. Sarah was a planner, meticulous and observant. Lena, Tyler's wife, was equally perceptive, though in a more laid-back, artistic way. Getting away for a weekend, simultaneously, without raising a single eyebrow, felt like a mission more complex than any rescue operation I'd ever been on. My annual man versus wild weekend, I'd announced one Tuesday evening at dinner, try to sound as nonchalant as possible. Leo, bless his 8-year-old heart, immediately perked up. "Are you going to eat bugs, Dad?" Sarah, however, raised an eyebrow. Man versus wild? Donald, you haven't gone camping alone since, well, ever. You usually insist on glamping or a cabin with Wi-Fi. I cleared my throat, forcing a convincing grimace. Exactly. That's why it's time to rough it. Reconnect with nature. Just me, a tent, and the sounds of crickets. I hoped she bought my newfound appreciation for solitude. Been feeling a bit wound up lately. Need to decompress. Just some quiet time in the woods. Sarah still looked skeptical, but then I played my ace. Besides, it'll be a good test run before I take Leo on a real father-son camping trip. Gotta scout out the best spots, you know. That did it. Leo, instantly excited by the prospect of future adventure, started badgering his mom, and Sarah, seeing the educational potential, finally relented. "All right, but call me every few hours and take plenty of bug spray." Phase 1, complete. Phase 2 was Tyler's alibi. That was easier in a way. He was a freelance photographer. His life was inherently less structured than mine, but it still needed to be believable. I caught him over the fence later that week, while our kids were at school. Got my alibi set. I murmured, trying to look like I was just admiring his prize-winning hydrangeas. He grinned, those piercing blue eyes sparkling. "Oh yeah? And what grand adventure is Mr. Dependable embarking on?" "Roughing it. Solo camping." Said I need to decompress. I muttered, feeling a little ridiculous saying it aloud. "What about you?" Tyler leaned closer, his voice dropping conspiratorially. "Lena's got this big art show coming up in the city. She's been stressing about needing new photographs for her portfolio. So I'm off on artistic retreat to capture some raw, untamed nature shots. Think misty mornings, dramatic landscapes, the whole 9 yards." He winked. Perfect excuse to disappear for a few days without anyone asking too many questions. A knot of anxiety in my stomach began to untangle, replaced by a surge of anticipation. It was happening. We were actually doing this. Planning a secret rendezvous in the middle of nowhere, just us. It felt reckless, dangerous, and incredibly liberating. "So," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "same park, same time." He gave me that disarming smile, the one that made my insides clench. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Donald. Just make sure you pack something more adventurous than a first aid kit." I had a feeling this trip would require a different kind of first aid entirely. My heart hammered, a mix of apprehension and pure, unadulterated excitement. The countdown to our secret began. Chapter 10. Into the Wilderness. The morning of our departure dawned with a nervous energy that vibrated in my chest. I said goodbye to Sarah and Leo, gave last-minute instructions about watering the plants, and tried to look convincingly excited about my solo wilderness adventure. The drive out of the city was a blur, my mind racing ahead to the rendezvous point. The state park was vast, a sprawling expanse of forest, lakes, and winding trails. We'd picked a remote trailhead for our meeting, a spot where only serious hikers tended to venture. I arrived first, parking my sturdy SUV near the faded trail marker. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a mix of fear and exhilarating anticipation. Minutes later, a sleek, slightly dust-covered vintage camper van, surprisingly stylish for a roughing it trip, rumbled into the small parking area. "Tyler." He emerged, a wide grin splitting his face, looking impossibly cool in cargo pants and a well-worn graphic tee. He threw his arms wide. "Donald, my wilderness guide, ready to commune with nature." His voice, a little too loud, echoed slightly in the quiet. I managed a tight smile, glancing around to ensure no one else was within earshot. "Keep it down, Mitchell. This isn't a concert." He chuckled, unperturbed, and sauntered over. Right. Stealth mode activated. Just checking for Bigfoot. Heard he's a big fan of lone campers." His eyes, however, held a more serious glint as they met mine, a silent acknowledgement of the real reason we were there. We unloaded our gear. My backpack was practical, sturdy, packed with emergency supplies and high-energy rations. Tyler's gear, predictably, was a quirky mix: a sleek, modern camera case, a small, brightly colored hammock, and a backpack that looked suspiciously light. "All right, lead the way, Mr. Former Firefighter. I trust your navigational skills implicitly. I'm more of an interpret the landscape kind of guy, not a follow the arrows kind of guy." We started on the trail, the dirt crunching softly under our boots. The initial conversation was light, bordering on awkward. We talked about the weather, the thickness of the canopy, the surprisingly good cell service, a point of contention. Tyler wanted to be fully disconnected. I preferred the safety net. But as we walked deeper into the woods, leaving the faint sounds of the road behind, the air between us began to shift. The easy camaraderie we shared back home, laced with the constant threat of discovery, morphed into something else out here. It was still there, the humor and the shared glances, but now it was unburdened, unobserved. We could laugh louder, linger in eye contact longer. We found a secluded spot near a small, gurgling stream, surrounded by tall pines. It was perfect. We set up our tents a respectful distance apart, but close enough that our voices, when we spoke, carried easily. "You know," Tyler said, wiping sweat from his brow after wrestling with his tent poles, he was surprisingly unhandy with practical tasks, which I found endearing. "This feels different." I looked up from tying down my tent fly. "Different how?" He sat back on his heels, gazing around at the towering trees. "Like we've stepped into another world. All the rules are gone. For now, anyway." He looked at me, his piercing blue eyes holding a depth I hadn't seen before, reflecting the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves. Just us and the trees. A shiver ran down my spine, unrelated to the cool forest air. He was right. Here, there was no hedge, no wives, no kids, no expectations. Just Donald and Tyler, and the vast, silent wilderness waiting for us. The setting sun began to paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long, encroaching shadows. The real journey, I realized, was just beginning. Chapter 11. Under a Million Stars. The sun dipped below the tree line, painting the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples that slowly faded to an inky black. We had cooked a simple dinner over a crackling fire, my pre-packaged, dehydrated meals meeting Tyler's surprisingly gourmet instant coffee. The practicalities of camping had provided a comfortable buffer, a veneer of normalcy that was now starting to thin. As the last embers glowed, casting dancing shadows on our faces, the conversation grew softer, more fragmented. We talked about nothing and everything: childhood memories, dreams we'd once had, the quiet dissatisfactions of lives lived by rote. The usual deflections and humor from Tyler were less frequent, replaced by a thoughtful honesty that made my chest ache in a strangely pleasant way. "You know," Tyler said, poking at the fire with a stick, his voice low, "I've always been good at deflecting. With a joke, with a camera. Keeps people from getting too close or seeing what's really going on." He glanced up, his blue eyes catching the firelight, making them seem impossibly deep. "But with you, it's different. I don't feel like I need to perform." His confession hung in the air, a vulnerable offering. I felt a tightening in my throat. "I feel that," I admitted, my voice rougher than I intended. "I've spent my whole life being the strong one, the reliable one. There's not much room for anything else." He nodded slowly. "But there's more, isn't there, Donald?" My gaze met his, And in the deep quiet of the forest, under the vast, star-pricked sky, there was no hiding. My heart hammered against my ribs, a wild drumbeat against the stillness. The air thickened with unspoken words, with years of buried desires. He shifted, turning fully towards me. The fire was dying down, leaving us in a soft, ethereal glow. He reached out, slowly, tentatively, and his fingers brushed my cheek. The touch was feather-light, yet it sent a jolt through me, a raw current of electricity that bypassed my brain and went straight to my core. "You're beautiful, Donald," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Those words. No one had ever looked at me like that, spoken to me like that. Not truly. My breath hitched. All my defenses, painstakingly built over decades, crumbled. I leaned into his touch, my hazel eyes locking with his. He closed the small distance between us, his other hand coming up to cup my jaw, his thumb gently caressing my beard. Then, slowly, as if waiting for me to pull away, which I couldn't, he leaned in. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then gaining confidence as I responded, my own lips parting in invitation. It was a kiss that was a lifetime in the making, desperate and tender, full of longing and release. My hands, usually so deliberate and controlled, found purchase on his waist, pulling him closer until there was no space left between us. The world outside our small circle of firelight faded away. There was only the feel of his lips, the scent of pine, and his unique, intoxicating musk, the soft murmur of the stream. When we finally broke apart, breathless, his forehead rested against mine, his ragged breath mingling with my own. "Tyler," I breathed, the word a reverent whisper. He pulled back just enough to look into my eyes, his own shining with an emotion so profound it stole my breath. "Donald," he murmured back, the sound of promise, a question, an answer all at once. We didn't speak another word. We didn't need to. Under the vast, silent canvas of a million stars, our secret, for one perfect, intimate night, was finally, gloriously, utterly open to each other. The soft sounds of the forest became our witness. The cool night air a gentle caress on our skin as we found comfort and passion in each other's arms, surrendering to a love that had been waiting patiently in the shadows. Chapter 12. The Quiet Morning After. The first light of dawn filtered through the canvas of my tent, painting the inside a soft, muted gold. I woke slowly, a delicious languor stretching through my limbs. For a moment, I was disoriented, then the memories of the night flooded back, warm and potent. Tyler, here, with me. My heart gave a quiet thrum. He was still asleep beside me, his sandy blonde hair fanned out on the makeshift pillow, his face relaxed and peaceful in the soft light. He looked impossibly young, utterly vulnerable. A warmth spread through my chest, something deeper and more profound than anything I'd felt in years. It wasn't just lust, though that had been undeniable. It was a profound sense of connection, of finally being seen, truly seen for the first time. I reached out, my fingers tracing the line of his jaw, the faint stubble. He stirred, a soft groan escaping his lips, and his piercing blue eyes fluttered open. They met mine, and in that instant, there was no awkwardness, no regret. Only a deep, shared understanding, a quiet recognition of the momentous thing that had passed between us. He smiled, a sleepy, tender smile that disarmed me completely. "Morning, Donald," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep. "Morning, Tyler," I replied, my own voice a little rough. I felt a blush creeping up my neck, despite myself. This was all so new, so utterly outside the boundaries of my carefully constructed life. Yet it felt undeniably right. He shifted closer, his arm snaking around my waist, pulling me gently against him. We lay there for a long moment, simply existing in each other's presence, the soft sounds of the waking forest outside, our only witness. The air inside the tent was warm with the scent of us, a mix of pine and something uniquely Tyler. Eventually, the need for coffee and the inevitable return to reality began to stir. "We should probably get moving soon," I said, the words heavy with reluctance. Tyler sighed, a soft sound against my shoulder. I know. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. He pulled back, propping himself up on an elbow, his gaze still tender. Last night was something else, Donald. I met his eyes, my heart aching with a bittersweet mix of joy and apprehension. There were no more words needed. The weight of our secret, though momentarily lifted in the dark, was already settling back upon us. We packed up our tents in a quiet, efficient rhythm. The easy banter had returned, but it was underlined with a new layer of intimacy, a subtle understanding that passed between us in shared glances and quiet smiles. When Tyler struggled with a particularly stubborn tent peg, I helped him without a word, our hands brushing, lingering for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. As we walked back to our vehicles, the morning sun now high in the sky, casting long shadows of the trees, the vastness of the wilderness seemed to shrink around us. We were returning to the world, to the rules, to the carefully guarded secrets. At the trailhead, we paused by our vehicles. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken promises and the heavy knowledge of what we were leaving behind. So, Tyler said, leaning against his van, a faint tremor in his voice, same time next year for the man versus wild and artistic retreat combo. He tried for his usual light tone, but his eyes were serious, searching mine. I nodded, a determined glint in my own eyes. Absolutely. But next time, I'm bringing more bug spray. It was a joke, a deflection, but underneath it was a fierce, unwavering commitment. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt thing that reached his eyes. Deal. He gave my arm a quick, firm squeeze, a contact that burned through my shirt. Drive safe, Donald. You too, Tyler. As I pulled away, watching his camper van disappear in my rearview mirror, I felt a profound shift within me. The man who had driven out here 2 days ago was not the same man driving back. The secret now had a face, a touch, a memory burned into my very soul. And though the weight of it was immense, the sheer, exhilarating joy of it felt even heavier. Chapter 13, Back to the Facade. The drive home was a jarring transition. The quiet contemplation of the forest faded with every mile, replaced by the increasing drone of city traffic, the familiar landmarks of suburbia rushing past. My mind, which had been blissfully free and open just hours ago, began to re-engage with the meticulous architecture of my everyday life. The Donald Anderson, who was a paramedic, a husband, a father, was waiting for me, and he had a carefully constructed role to play. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked exactly as I'd left it, neat, orderly, reassuringly normal. Sarah was already on the porch, a welcoming smile on her face, Leo bouncing beside her. I forced a grin, a slight ache in my jaw from the effort. Dad, you're back. Did you see any bears? Leo launched himself at me, and I caught him, burying my face in his hair, the familiar scent of home, of childhood, washing over me. No bears, buddy. I chuckled, ruffling his hair. Just lots of quiet trees and fresh air. Sarah stepped forward, giving me a quick, warm hug. Welcome home, wilderness man. You look refreshed. Her eyes, however, held a curious glint. A little different, actually. Did you manage to decompress? Absolutely. I lied smoothly, my arm still around Leo. Best decision I've made in years. Just needed that quiet time. I kept my voice even, my body language relaxed, hoping to project the image of a man content after a solitary retreat. Inside, I was a coiled spring, hyper-aware of the stark contrast between the intimacy of the past night and this perfectly orchestrated reunion. Later that evening, after a hearty dinner and Leo's endless questions about my survivor skills, I found myself staring out the kitchen window, drawn to the familiar glow of Tyler's garage light next door. He must have gone back, too. My stomach did a nervous flip. The urge to just walk over, to see him, to feel the comfort of his gaze, was almost overwhelming. But I couldn't. Not now. The next morning was Monday. Back to the grind. Back to shifts, to routines, to the rigid boundaries of our lives. I saw Tyler later as I was getting the mail. He was putting out his recycling bins, looking just as put together as ever in a clean t-shirt and jeans. He gave me a brief nod, a small, polite smile that was reserved for neighbors. It was a practice performance, one I knew I needed to emulate. "Morning, Donald," he called, his voice light, carrying over the fence. "Morning, Tyler," I replied, equally casual, but my eyes sought his, searching for the lingering connection. They met, and for a fleeting second, the mundane facade shattered. His blue eyes held a depth, a silent understanding that passed between us, a raw acknowledgement of the secret we now shared. A ghost of his tender smile from the tent flickered, almost imperceptible. My breath hitched. It was there. The memory, the intimacy, was still vibrant, pulsing just beneath the surface of our public personas. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. How was I supposed to go back to pretending he was just a neighbor when my body still hummed with the memory of his touch and my mind replayed his soft whispers under a million stars? The secret felt heavier now, weighted by the profound experience we had shared. It wasn't just a mischievous flirtation anymore. It was a deeply personal, sacred bond that had to be hidden at all costs. And as I turned away, the weight of that truth pressed down on me, a constant, beautiful, dangerous ache in my chest. Chapter 14. Echoes and Longing. The days that followed our camping trip felt like a blur, a monotonous loop of routine tasks colored by a vivid, searing memory. Every mundane interaction was now a performance. I was a man constantly playing a role, my true self locked away, only glimpsed in stolen moments or private thoughts. Tyler's presence next door, once a charming distraction, was now an insistent ache. Every time I saw him, watering his lawn, collecting the mail, or just glimpsing him through the kitchen window, a jolt went through me. My senses seemed to have been heightened, tuned specifically to him. I noticed the way his sandy blonde hair fell, just so, the specific curve of his smile, the way his shoulders moved when he laughed. Details I'd previously glossed over now hit me with the force of a revelation. Our wives, Sarah and Lena, continued their easy friendship, often arranging joint activities for the kids. This meant more forced proximity for Tyler and me, more opportunities for our eyes to meet, for our hands to brush accidentally while reaching for a shared toy or a plate of snacks. Each casual touch was a tiny electric current, a silent scream of longing. One afternoon, Leo and Maya were having a fierce water gun battle in my backyard. Sarah was inside, baking with Lena. I was ostensibly supervising, but my gaze kept drifting to Tyler, who was leaning against his fence, sketching in his notebook, a faint smile on his lips as he watched the kids. He looked up, caught my eye, and held my gaze for a beat too long, his blue eyes holding a warmth that was meant only for me. My stomach flipped. "Donald, incoming!" Leo yelled, and a stream of water hit me square in the chest. I startled, the cold water a welcome jolt back to reality. I managed a genuine laugh, wiping my face. Tyler just chuckled a low, knowing sound. The interaction was perfectly innocent to anyone observing, but the undercurrent of shared intimacy was a roaring river to me. The longing was almost unbearable. It wasn't just for the physical intimacy, though that had been explosive. It was for the emotional connection, the raw honesty we'd shared under the stars. Here, back in our lives, we were walled off from each other by invisible barriers, forced to communicate in a secret language of glances and half-smiles. The constant vigilance was draining. Every time Tyler's van pulled away, a pang of fear hit me. Was he meeting someone? Was he okay? Every time he returned, a rush of relief. The jealousy, new and unwelcome, was a bitter taste. One particularly stressful evening, after a long shift and a tense conversation with Sarah about a minor household expense, I stepped out onto my back porch for some air. I heard a faint melody from next door, Tyler, strumming a guitar softly. He had never mentioned playing before. The music was a mellow, bluesy tune, tinged with melancholy. It perfectly mirrored my mood. I leaned against the railing, listening, finding an unexpected comfort in the sound. After a few minutes, the music stopped. Then silence. A beat passed. Can't sleep. Tyler's voice, soft and low, drifted over the hedge. He was standing on his porch, a shadowy figure in the darkness. Just clearing my head, I replied, my voice equally quiet. Yeah, he murmured. Me too. It's loud sometimes, isn't it? I knew he wasn't talking about the crickets. Yeah, I agreed, a profound understanding passing between us in the quiet night. Suddenly, a light flicked on in Lena's kitchen window, casting a rectangle of warmth onto Tyler's porch. He flinched, quickly stepping back into the deeper shadows, his guitar falling silent. I instinctively did the same. Everything okay out there, Ty? Lena's voice floated across the yard, cheerful and unsuspecting. Just getting some air, babe, he called back, his voice instantly bright and casual. Too many mosquitoes. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. We'd been so close, so careless. The near miss was a stark reminder of the fragile line we walked. The echoes of our intimate night were constant, but so was the ever-present threat of our open secret becoming truly, devastatingly public. The longing for him was immense, but so was the terror of what we stood to lose. Chapter 15, A New Landscape. The days blurred into a monotonous rhythm, punctuated by the sharp, vivid memories of the camping trip. Every morning, I woke with a familiar ache, a phantom limb where Tyler's presence should be. My life, once so perfectly charted, now felt like a ship adrift, navigating by the unreliable compass of my heart. The casual interactions with Tyler, once a source of secret delight, had become a torment. Each shared glance, each brushed hand, was a reminder of what we couldn't have, what we couldn't openly claim. The constant vigilance was exhausting, a perpetual performance for an audience of wives, children, and unsuspecting neighbors. I found myself dissecting every conversation, every smile, searching for any sign of recognition in others' eyes. Sarah still seemed oblivious, but Lena was perceptive. Sometimes I caught her looking at Tyler and me, a thoughtful, unreadable expression on her face. A chill would run down my spine. I spent hours in my garage, ostensibly working on woodworking projects, but mostly just staring at the grain of the wood, lost in thought. The raw, exhilarating freedom I'd felt in the wilderness with Tyler was starkly contrasted by the suffocating weight of my suburban life. I loved Sarah, of course. She was a good woman, a devoted mother. And Leo was my world. But the love I felt for Tyler was different. It was a visceral, undeniable pull, a recognition of a missing piece I hadn't even known existed. It was the feeling of finally breathing. How long could this go on? How long could I live this double life? The guilt was a dull throb, ever present. Guilt towards Sarah, towards Leo, toward the life I had built. But then, a flicker of Tyler's smile, the memory of his touch, and the guilt would momentarily recede, replaced by a fierce, protective desire for what we had. I thought about the future. What would it look like? A lifetime of stolen moments, whispered words across a hedge, clandestine meetings in the dark? The thought was soul-crushing, but the alternative was unimaginable. The thought of losing Tyler, of never feeling that profound connection again, was a cold dread that settled deep in my bones. One evening, I watched Tyler from my kitchen window as he laughed with Lena on their porch. He looked happy, relaxed. He was open about who he was, proud of his identity. And I was stuck, suffocating in a gilded cage of my own making. The scar on my forearm, once a badge of honor, now felt like a symbol of all the battles I'd fought for others, but never truly for myself. The camping trip had been a portal. It had shown me a different landscape, a different version of myself. A version that was alive, authentic, and deeply, desperately in love with another man. And now that I'd seen it, I couldn't unsee it. The world had shifted on its axis. My old life, which once felt stable and secure, now seemed fragile, a precarious balancing act. I knew, with a certainty that both terrified and emboldened me, that I couldn't go back to how things were. The secret was too big, the longing too strong, the connection too real. Something had to give. The hedge between our houses had been pruned, but the one in my heart had been irrevocably breached. In the future, whatever it held, would demand a reckoning. I just didn't know yet if I had the courage to face it,